Good afternoon, everyone. So you can see on the far bottom right, you have Cyprus, which is a small island near Turkey, who is part of the European Union. We also see Ireland, and in the north, we see Finland and Sweden. It's important to note that countries such as Switzerland, which is in the heart of Europe, is not a member of the European Union. It is part of Europe, and they are part of certain treaties that work closely with the European Union, but they're not actual members of the European Union. And as you know, and I mentioned before, there are 27 member states. They used to be 28 before the Brexit. So once the United Kingdom left the EU, we are now 27 member states. The ones in gray color are candidate countries or potential candidates, such as Turkey, Montenegro, Albania, Serbia are among those countries that are considered either candidates or potential candidates of the European Union. The 27 member states in alphabetical order are Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden. Okay? It's very important because there are some international organizations where the European Union countries or member states are part, but there are also other European countries who are part, but is not part of the European Union. That's why it's important for you to distinguish which countries are part of the European Union and which countries are not. Something that it's important to understand about the European Union is that even though member states are still sovereign and independent, what they did is pool some of their sovereignty towards the European Union in very specific areas. Okay, so what they do is they delegate some of their decision-making powers to the European Union institutions, such as the Parliament, the Council of Ministers, and the European Commission. So it's important to note that. And also remember, this is an ongoing process. So we are still advancing in the integration process. And there are constantly changes that are going on. Sometimes the integration process is stronger and countries unite more, and sometimes it's slower. So it has to do with a lot of things related to the political aspects of the member states. It also has to do with different crises that have happened and different challenges that the European Union has had to face during all these years of the integration process that started in 1950. And so, as you can imagine, we are going to see through history how it started and then what the steps were taken afterwards and where we are today. This is interesting to know. There are different symbols of the European Union. It's not a country, okay? So it's a union where many member states have pulled in some of their sovereignty in certain aspects and created institutions. And in this case, these are the 5 symbols of the European Union. The first one depicts the motto of the European Union, which talks about union in diversity. And it highlights the fact that even though all member states are different, some of them have different languages, different customs, different culture, there is unity among them. And that's important. The second symbol where you see the music notes is the European Union hymn. For those of you who have not identified which one it is the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven. That is the hymn of the European, or the national anthem of the European Union. Then we have another symbol that is very important, which is the euro. And as you know, not all member states have adopted the euro. Out of 27 member states, there are 20 countries who are now using the euro, and that's part of the class that you will learn with Professor Saucedo. The fourth symbol that you see in your screen is the flag, the European flag. The background is in blue, and you can see 12 golden stars. The 12 golden stars represent unity. Okay, they don't, as for example, when you compare with the flag from the United States, that the stars represent the different states that are part of the United States. In this case, is a number that represents unity. And then we have the last one, which is the birthday. When is the birthday of the European Union? It's on May 9th. On May 9th, we celebrate the birthday of the European Union. Next class, we're going to talk about the Robert Schuman Declaration, and you will understand why this is considered the birthday of the European Union. Another interesting fact about the European Union is that it has 24 official languages. So you can imagine what the translation and interpretation services that they have in the European Union, precisely because it is very large. Every person that works either for the European Union or has interactions with the European Union have the right to speak in one of the official languages. So, for example, if you are a member of parliament and you are from Denmark, you can speak in Danish. And then at the same time, they have to translate to all the other official languages so that everybody can understand what you're saying. Here are classified the official languages. There are those who are based in Germanic, those who are Romance, Slavic, and then others. In the Germanic, we find Danish, German, English, Dutch, and Swedish. Romance, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian. In the Slavic, Bulgarian, Czech, Croatian, Polish, Slovak, Slovene. And then others is Estonian, Finnish, Greek, Irish, Lithuanian, Latvian, Hungarian, and Maltese. And those are the official languages of the European Union. Remember that if you have any questions at any moment, you can ask and interrupt without any issues. Okay? So the EU covers over 4 million square kilometers and has around 449, I think, million inhabitants to date. This is what we have till 2003. And as you can see, there's a huge difference between the population in Germany, for example, which is almost 85 million, with Malta, which is the smallest country that has 542,051 inhabitants. And as you can see, there are few large countries. Most are medium or small size countries. Okay? This creates a challenge for the European Union, specifically when we talked about how they make decisions, for example, how they vote, how they weigh the votes. And when we talk about the institutions, we will talk about this aspect, which is also important. But as you can imagine, out of the 27 member states, well, there are huge differences regarding, for example, the population. This is a timeline of important things that happened in Europe. So in 1945, we have the end of World War II. Then in 1950, we have the Schuman Declaration. In 1951, the European Coal and Steel Community was established. In 1957, the Treaty of Rome. In 1992, the Maastricht Treaty. In 1993, the Single Market. 1995, the Schengen Agreement. 2002, the Euro was introduced. And in 2004, there was the Eastern Enlargement, which is the largest enlargement that has happened in the European Union, where 10 member states joined the European Union at once. And then in 2007, we have the Lisbon Treaty. This is just to give you, as I mentioned before, an overview of certain important aspects of the European Union. Regarding the enlargement, it's important to note that the founding member states were 6. In 1951, Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and Netherlands joined this integration process. And then in 1973, Denmark, Ireland, and the UK joined. And as you know, the UK left in 2020. In 1981, Greece joined the European Union. In 1986, Spain, Portugal. In 1995, Austria, Finland, and Sweden. And then, as I mentioned, in 2004, it was the largest introduction of new member states, where Czechia, Estonia, Cyprus, Latvia, Lithuania, Hungary, Malta, Poland, Slovenia, and Slovakia joined the European Union. 3 years later, in 2007, Bulgaria, Romania joined. And then Croatia in 2013 was the last country to join. In some cases, for example, in the case of Greece, Spain, and Portugal, they could not join before the European Union integration process because they didn't follow the democratic principles. They had dictators in their countries. So until the country became a democracy, which is one of the requirements, then they were able to submit their application to become part of the integration process. And this is the Schengen Area. These are the countries. You can see the small flags in the territory. Those who are in a strong blue are member of the Schengen Area. And as you can see, some countries who are not part of the EU are part of the Schengen Area, such as Norway, such as Iceland, such as Switzerland. But then there are non-Schengen Area EU countries, as you can see, such as Ireland. And so in these 27 countries who are part of the Schengen Agreement, you can travel freely without showing your passport. So once you enter, for example, Spain, and of course, you have to show your passport and you have to be admitted to be able to enter Spain. But once you enter Spain, when you travel to France, to Switzerland, to Italy, to Germany, to Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, all of the countries who are part of the Schengen, you don't have to show your passport. There are no internal borders in that sense. You can freely travel around. That is the Schengen Area. Regarding the euro, these are the countries that use the euro. There are 20 countries, the ones in blue, and the ones in yellow have not yet used the euro as their official currency. With Professor Saucedo, you will talk more in detail about the monetary policy of the European Union, the European Central Bank, and specifically the euro. Okay? Do you have any questions up to now? And remember that I will share this presentation and I will also share the information about the first activity that we're going to work on. So you don't have to worry about writing everything down. And we also record our classes so that you can go back and look at them in case you have any questions. something that is quite important for the European Union. What are the values of the European Union? Well, among the values that they promote are human dignity. For the European Union, human dignity must be respected, protected, and constitutes the real basis of fundamental rights. Also, freedom of movements gives citizens the right to move and reside freely within the EU. So there are 4 different types of freedom. You have the freedom of goods, of services, of people, and also of capitals within the European Union. As I mentioned before, democracy is very important for the European Union, and the functioning of the European Union is actually based on represented democracy. A European citizen automatically enjoys political rights. Equality is also very important. All citizens are equal before the law. And the equality between men and women is also very important, and you can see it in European policies. And you can also see it in the European integration. It is true that we cannot talk about equality between, for example, men and women at work, but with all the policies that have been implemented, the European Union has achieved quite success, not yet the level that they would like to, but they're moving towards that direction, and I think it's also very important. The rule of law. So everything the European Union does has to be founded on treaties that were voluntarily and democratically agreed by EU countries. The European Union is based on the rule of law. And also the human rights are protected by the EU, the European Union Charter of Fundamental Rights. Those are the values that the European Union promotes. And there are also aims that the European has within its borders and then within its external borders towards everybody else. So the aims within its borders are to promote peace, values, and the well-being of its citizens, freedom, security, and justice, while also taking measures to regulate asylum and migration and prevent and combat crime. Also, among the aims is to establish an internal market, and we will talk about this when we will look at the historical aspect, because it's very important for the European Union. And also to achieve sustainable development based on a balanced economic growth and price stability, and a highly competitive market economy with employment and social progress. So for the European Union, it's very important to think about the environment, sustainable development, and also scientific and technological progress. Actually, many of the policies of the European Union regarding to protect the environment, for example, and also to promote companies that are sustainable. There have been large investments done in that. The European Union's fight against climate change is very important for EU member states, and they have reached important agreements in order to advance in this specific subject. Also, combat social exclusion and discrimination within the European Union. Enhance economic and social and territorial cohesion and solidarity among EU countries. Also respect the rich cultural and linguistic diversity. There are many programs in the European Union that promote this. They call them the cultural capitals, and they select some capitals that they promote. because of the rich cultural and linguistic diversity, and so that people learn more about each other as I mentioned before, they come from different backgrounds, different languages, different cultures, and sometimes even different languages. And also to establish an economic and monetary union whose currency is the euro. And then these are the aims to the wider world, to the external. Among them, you have to uphold and promote all of the values that we mentioned and interest, contribute to peace and security and the sustainable development of the earth. As I mentioned, the environment is important to the European Union member states. Also to contribute to solidarity and mutual respect. Sorry, I don't know why it's advancing so fast. Among peoples, free and fair trade, eradicate poverty and protect human rights, and also the strict observance of international law. For the European Union, multilateral organizations are important to keep a balance in an international world. So these are some of the aims of the European Union towards a wider world, or you can say external. Now, the European institutions, there are 7 institutions that are fundamental in the integration process, and we will see when we discuss them, or you can say external. Now, the European institutions, there are 7 institutions that are fundamental in the integration process, and we will see when we discuss them. In this case, this is the European Commission. And what the European Commission does, it's like the executive power of the European Union. It represents the EU common interest. There is a president and a commissioner, and there's one per member state. They propose new laws and programs. They are elected by the European Parliament for 5 years. They manage EU policies and budget, and they're considered the guardian of the treaties. In the first picture, you can see the president, Ursula von der Leyen, with some of the commissioners. And then in the bottom one, you can see the main building of the European Commission. Okay? This is one of the institutions that we will talk in detail when we learn more about the European institutions. And they are located in Brussels and Luxembourg. The European Council. They bring together the heads of state or government of each member state. Why is this important? Because it depends on how each member state is organized. In some cases, they are represented by the prime minister. In some cases, they're represented by the president. Each member state selects who will represent them in this institution, which is the European Council. They set the EU's main priorities and policy directions. They do not adopt EU laws. They're not part of the legislative process of the European Union. And they meet at least 4 times a year in Brussels or Luxembourg for European summits. If there is, for example, a crisis or something very important that's going on, they can have as many meetings as they need, but at least 4 times a year they need to meet. This is quite complicated because, as you can imagine, these are 27 member states. You need to get the agendas of these very busy people to get together to work and discuss topics related to the European Union. Then we have the Council of the European Union, or the Council of Ministers, which is different from the European Council. They represent the governments of the European Union countries. They bring together ministers who discuss EU matters. For example, if they're going to talk about something related to finance, you have all the ministers of finance from the member states who will come to get together in these meetings and discuss topics related to that specific subject. So depending on the subject is the ministers who will represent the member state. They take decision and pass laws together with the European Parliament. So we have the European Commission, which we already saw. We're looking at the Council and the European Parliament. Those are the three institutions who participate in the legislative process, either by proposing a new law or making decisions regarding those laws, either they are passed or not. And it's important to keep that in mind. They have a rotating presidency. Every 6 months, another EU country takes the lead. So every 6 months, there is a president of the Council of the European Union. There is a schedule already for the next years, and we already know who is in this current presidency, who's going to be in the next one, and so forth and so on. They meet in Brussels or Luxembourg. Then we have the European Parliament. Oh, sorry. In the picture, you see this is the entrance to the Council, and you can see the building from the outside. And then we look at the European Parliament is the voice of the European citizens. It represents the citizens of the European Union who directly elect all of the members of the European Parliament. So there are members from all EU countries. They're elected for 5 years. They discuss new laws proposed by the European Commission. They modify if it's necessary and decide together with the Council. It doesn't refer to the European Council, but the Council of Ministers. It elects the President of the European Commission, it approves the budget, and it holds at least 6 sessions per year in Brussels and 12 in Strasbourg, France. Then we have the European Court of Justice. It keeps tracks of EU laws. It makes sure that member states respect the European Union laws, advises national courts on how to interpret those laws. It fines countries if they do not respect the European Union law. It checks if the laws respect fundamental rights, for example, the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, consists of 1 judge per EU country, and it is located in Luxembourg. When we look at this institution, we will learn about the General Court, about the European Court, how it is divided, how it is formed, how it works in practice. Then we also have the European Court of Auditors. What they do is that they check that the EU's budget has been spent correctly. They report fraud, corruption, or any illegal activity regarding the budget or the accounts of the European Union. It also advises EU policymakers on how to best spend the budget. It's not only that they're fighting corruption, but also that they are giving advice on how to better spend the budget to make sure that what the money that we are using from the European Union is correctly used for the objective that it was established. It has members appointed by the Council for 6-year terms. And then we have the European Central Bank. It leads the economic and monetary policy. It manages the European currency, which is the euro. It is responsible for keeping the euro and prices stable, fixes interest rates for the euro area, works with the national central banks of EU countries, and it has 6 members appointed by the Council for an 8-year term that cannot be renewed. So after 8 years, they have to leave and new ones are selected. And they're located in Germany, in Frankfurt. Now, just to give you also an overview, what is the EU's role in global trade? Because usually when we think about powerful countries, we think about the United States, we think about China, maybe Japan, maybe the UK. But it's also important to understand what is the role of the European Union. So it is a world leader in trade in goods and services. So if you look at how many goods or services are traded within the European Union, we can see that it's 7.6 trillion. So it's quite big. And of course, this considers the 27 member states. Okay? Also, from the world share, you can see that the European Union has 16.1%, China represents 13.5%, the US 13.5%, UK 4.3%, Japan 3.8%, and the rest of the countries 48.8%. It is the top trading partner for 80 countries. So 17% of their trade goes to the US, 15% China, United Kingdom 10%, Switzerland, Turkey, Norway, and then the others. And this is considered trade in goods. Main export products, well, most of them are machinery and transport equipment. 21.6% are manufactured goods. Chemicals also is quite strong with 20.5%. And then we have others. The EU is the largest investor and the largest recipient of foreign direct investment in the world. This is from data from 2022. 30.9% of outward foreign direct investment to the EU and 25.2% of inward foreign direct investment stocks globally. It promotes free trade. There are many free trade agreements signed by the European Union. There are 44 preferential agreements with 76 partners. The purpose can be either facilitating market access for European Union companies with lower tariffs and less bureaucracy, but it can also be to promote the EU's principles and values. Partners are encouraged to follow the EU's environmental and social standards. And that is all regarding the large overview of what is the European Union and how it works. Do you have any questions regarding what we just talked about, this overview? We talked about who are the member states, what is the European Union, the symbols, the languages, the institutions, the values, the objectives or the aims, and then a global overview of the EU's role on global trade. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you don't, I will continue. I know it's a lot of information, and since we're just starting with a class, sometimes it's difficult to follow everything, but know that you will have access. I will send you via WhatsApp and also via email the presentation that I used today, and also the instructions for our first activity for the class. But if you have any questions that you have right now or anything you would like to know, please let me know before I continue. I know that I sometimes speak really fast, especially when I'm talking about a topic such as this topic that I love and I'm very excited to talk about. So if you think that I'm talking too fast and you need for me to go slower, let me know too. There's no problem. I will do my best effort. And well, that's it. I advise you to, once I share with you all the information of the class and the presentation, look again at the video in case you have any questions, and also at the materials. But as I mentioned, feel free to ask any questions if you have. Okay, Angel, yes? You have your microphone off, so we can't hear you.
Teacher, I have a question.
Yes.
Why the UK leave the European Union?
That's a very good question. There are many experts who have discussed the different reasons. There was a referendum done. Some countries, such as Denmark, for example, and Ireland too, and the UK, sometimes the government asks the citizens a question regarding a specific topic of what they think of what should be done. So, for example, when there was a discussion of creating a constitution for the European Union, there were referendums in certain countries, and some countries said no. In this case, there was a referendum by the British government to determine if the British citizens wanted to stay or not in the European Union. And unfortunately, the results was that a very small majority of citizens said, no, we don't want to be part of the European Union. The reasons were very, very varied, but a lot of them thought that they were paying more than what they were receiving from the European Union, meaning that it cost them and they were suffering as citizens because instead of sending money to the European institutions, they could use that money for a better health system, for example, or to improve infrastructure or certain things within their territory. In my personal opinion, I don't think that is accurate. And we will see the results in the next few years of what the impact has been for the UK, and if they achieve what they thought that would happen, that by leaving the European Union, they would be able to grow faster and better, not being part of the European Union. What is true is, since the UK joined the European Union, it was more interested in all the economic aspects and trade aspects. To take advantage of that because it was within their interest. But in the social aspects and other aspects and political aspects, not necessarily. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's been times where the integration process has advanced very fast and when it has gone slower. When it's not regarding anything economic or trade related, usually the UK wanted to go slower. So I think it was a shock and a surprise because most people or experts thought that the referendum would be that they wanted to stay. And when they lost the referendum, then it activated and it became a political argument. And some politicians wanted to leave the European Union. And if they did leave the European Union, in many aspects, they don't have access to the same things. But I think that when you are part of a process such as this, when you are stronger, when you're together, than when you try to do it on your own. So now the UK has to negotiate with the US. And as you can imagine, you don't have the same power as 28 member states representing 500 million inhabitants, as opposed to just a smaller country trying to negotiate with China and other powers, right? Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. So for your first activity.
Well, teacher, I have a mention.
Yes.
For me, everything is so quite clear so far, but I have mentioned about the symbols for the imagine of the diversity. I consider it's very important, and more in that time. Because, well, I like it more. The European Union and it's more, well, how do you say, como se centra más?
It's more focused.
It's more focused in the humans, in the respect, in the men or women, and everything is good in the parts. And yeah, it's, well, I think I want to say, and it's very funny, and the photo of the cake, it's very funny.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's everything for me.
Yeah, no, it is true. It's what is very interesting is that even though there are, as I mentioned, very diverse citizens and countries who are joining together, the European Union does not exist to make them all the same. The reason is not for all to speak the same language, to everybody who have to have the same culture or the same music or the same things as everybody else. They celebrate and love the diversity that they represent. And so they want to enhance these different languages, culture, and diversity that exist, reminding the world that we can be united even though we're different, right? So I think it's a very interesting and very important value that the European Union promotes. Leslie, you mentioned, yes, the number of immigrants in the UK. Yes. Usually, as you might see in the US, a lot of governments focus on immigration as a source of all of the problems, economic problems and social and security problems within the country, right? So it's not that we're not doing a good job. It's the immigrants' faults who are taking our jobs, who are stealing our money, or who are taking advantage of our system. And then we don't have what we should. What it is true is that the UK, as many other countries such as France and Germany, they need immigrants to fulfill certain jobs. Same thing in the US, same thing in Canada. There are populations who have negative growth in many cases, and they need the immigrants in order for their country to advance and subsist. So it is true that for some politicians and some people, they mentioned the problem of the immigration. I'm not sure that they see any results now that they're not part of the European Union. I don't think they can say that they have less immigrants now and that they've solved that problem, even though they've been out of the integration process for a few years. We should be able to see the results, but I don't think we see them. So yes, that was also one of the arguments. I don't always agree with that argument, but yes, a lot of governments use it to try to explain or to justify certain things. It is true that some immigrants have more trouble adjusting and adapting to new countries, but in other cases, there have been interesting results, and they have given back to the community that gave them asylum or allowed them to work and live there. But it's always a very sore subject to talk about.